Hello everyone. We can start. Jana will be a bit late, but she knows everything and she's in order, the last one. My name is Križaj Leko. I'm very happy. I'm from Rijeka, port city in Croatia, if somebody doesn't know. Also, I'm part of DeltaLab, new specialist study in a part of University of Rijeka, which will deal and start in March next year, and it will be held in also one reuse building, ex-Istravino export. I couldn't like when someone says reuse, I really hate that word, but because it's so popular that sometimes it's irritating. But for now, everything my own experience is always connected with it. When I looked to your CVs and got this input from Mia about the topic of active reuse and public buildings, I really couldn't look it through my own experience, which is really interesting for this new European Bauhaus conference, because I can't do it against me that I really see this discrepancy in my experience between this physical reuse and between this programmatic reuse. My greatest experience from ECOC 2020, Rijeka was in 2020 European Capital of Culture. It is mostly and firstly programmatic reusage of the city. But in media, which is very interesting and very conservative, if you ask me, people wanted to do the infrastructure and physical reusage. And this made some discrepancies between it. I think the success of reuse must be combined programmatic and physical to be successful. I would like now read these attributes of programmatic reuse. It doesn't have an obligation of the physical redesign of the space that occupies. Through the program, has an aim to build or strengthen the community, firstly. It is mostly bottom-up approach. It triggers the role of an architect as a design object or the engineer focused, and mostly is non-authorial approach. This is something now after the ECO project is the biggest legacy in Rijeka, because new groups and communities are being made, which are changing the whole neighborhood. As seen in this intro of Mia, sometimes the bench is the most successful use if it is on right place for right people. And physical reuse, when I talk about a physical reuse, I think that it is really engineer and design solution first oriented, connected to the future function of reused building or area. Technically suitable for future functions, invites people and future users. In most cases, it's a top-down approach because also as seen, it is a decision somebody does. Sometimes it is not the expertise that do these decisions. It's mostly a political decision. Of course, successful physical reuse, it is with great respect to existing and the heritage. And mostly it is very authorial approach. So I somehow, I divided you in 3 groups. I would like to start with a talk about the heritage. For the most people who are not experts, engineers or art historians or someone who are interested in the history of the cities, heritage and community can't sometimes are on the different sizes, because community sometimes communities sometimes hate everything which is called heritage, because they think there are so many obstacles to get their aim. So my first question is for Nuno Valentin. So the question goes, and also the other one is for Marin. Marin, as a younger expert dealing with heritage. First, so the heritage restoration and all these heavy obligatory words are often very repulsive for common people. What are your new experiences in combining heritage and community in a form of reuse?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you very much for the question. I'm sorry, I have some hotel music in the background because I'm in a construction site and not possible to be there, so I had to come to a hotel nearby. So that's why the background is like this. But yeah, I salute everyone. I'm in Coimbra, in the center of Portugal, near Porto, and I salute everyone. Yes, I totally agree with you, Ida. Heritage word, the word heritage or patrimony, or makes people nervous. Yeah. Because of all the weight that it carries, and probably because of the responsibility. We know that, yeah, working in a heritage site, it's different from working in a plain void site, even if the challenges are, we believe, this architecturally the same, even if the degree of knowledge, of layers, etc., is very different. So the thing, probably what I can share with you, it's my latest experience in working in this Oporto city central market, Bologna. It's a huge market that was waiting for 30 years to have works. And Bologna had 4 execution architectural projects ready to be built in the last 30 years. But so as you can imagine, these 4 projects, the last one is, I'm the author of the last one that is finally being built. So it's very interesting because we have, like, for the same place, for the same site, from the same historical building, 4 totally different visions, architectural visions, political visions, and it's a very, very unique and single case study. But also, what makes it very interesting is that he's a national classified building, but he has both classifications. That means that he has a physical protection and an immaterial use protection. And so, and this dialogue between a physical protection and an unmaterial protection, a use, the people that are that always made this place so special, the sellers, so it poses the architect and the politicians very difficult decisions that only can be made instructed by knowledge. knowledge of the site, historical, social, knowledge of the conditions of the people, social, economical, and knowledge of and a vision for the future, a cultural vision for the future. So what I probably, the conclusion that I arrive, I don't have time to explain you the project, etc. But the conclusion that I arrive is that we were lucky now that I believe, even if I'm involved in the project, that the project now that's being built, curiously or not, is the one that is more attentive and more close to the original program, is more attentive and close to the people. It has a huge effort of keeping as much people that were already there as possible. It uses and occupies the less public space possible in order to give people the public space. I'm talking about arriving to the technical areas, the garage, etc. So we made a huge effort to leave the public space free for the people to occupy. It's the project that it constructs the less, it's more in terms of surface. So, and it has been a very, very interesting dialogue between the town hall, the sellers, and well, and that's why I believe that is finally being built, because the government of the city finally arrived to a political decision instructed by knowledge of the field and architectural knowledge.
This is very interesting about this way of bottom up and top down. So yes, it came probably partly bottom up. Okay, then top down, yes, we will do that. It's a political decision. Okay, and then we had to make some knowledge to make this top down understand the bottom up, and then you have this like balance. It's a time consuming also probably more than all the other projects, building a new buildings, yeah. So Marin, also the same question for you.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for being here. I'm really pleased to be part of this meeting. So I would also like to reflect on that relationship between community and heritage. The heritage debate over the past decades had sometimes settled into two, let's say, opposing camps, usually opposing, but not necessarily always. First are those who, as already mentioned in the introduction, are concerned with the materiality of the building and all the technicalities. And the second camp represents those who understand heritage as a cultural process that is, let's say, indivisible from the community. So it's important to emphasize that both of those points of view are needed in the process of heritage reuse, and that much has already been achieved with the turn towards community involvement, where practitioners and investors recognize that the community engagement helps them to achieve their own objectives. So they obtain public support for their actions, and in the same time, community is also pleased with all the actions that happened. So as community involvement became more relevant, I think it's important also to define the term community in the terms of heritage, reuse, renewal, and so on. So I believe that such communities can be distinguished into three categories. First are the people that are generally interested in heritage. They feel positive about the heritage, and they want to act as supporters no matter what happens. Not really no matter what happens, but usually they will act as supporters. Second group are the people who are affected positively or negatively with the heritage in any way. So they can be residents, users, owners, and so on. And the third category are the people that live within or close by the urban heritage. So they can be residents. I mean, they are residents who can be or feel attached or not feel attached to the local heritage nearby. So I believe then that when talking about community involvement, it's important to have these three categories in mind. I would also like to reflect on the level of community involvement or participation in heritage topics. That involvement can vary from passive to active involvement. So it can start with mere education, where experts, like that top-down method, experts educate the public about the values of the heritage. That involvement, they can go up to the ladder with a later move, like, for example, to the advisory role or even collaboration on the project. And maybe the highest way of involvement, which needs to be emphasized, are the grassroots projects which initiated the heritage reuse and can sometimes even have some political power in decision making. So the question is always asked, what is the best way of engaging communities and how to encourage the interlink between community and heritage? We know that before every technical elaboration or of the reuse project that is usually made by an expert, it is necessary to design a quality program. That program represents a starting point that usually comes before the project and represents an ongoing dialogue during the project. A good program can encourage local pride and even improve the general quality of the place. One thing I would also like to reflect is what happens with the building, with the heritage building, after we finish the renewal. So the question is how to ensure that the heritage is still being used by community. The reused heritage needs to remain meaningful to the community. So those are also the topics we need to reflect. In some places, heritage is strongly linked with leisure activity, with the activities connected with the education. So we need to know that most community heritage engagements, when we talk about them, will take the place within the segment of the non-work daily schedule, so in the evenings or in the afternoon. Also, it's important maybe to reflect that studies have shown that the level of education, household income, and even student status are the most important variables in determining the probability and number of visits to cultural sites, such as museums, galleries, historical and archaeological sites. So we also need to develop strategies that will include involvement of all the social groups, not only the groups that have higher education, higher household income, and so on, and that all the social groups will still use that reused heritage building in a later life. In order to implement this reuse process in a sustainable way over time, it's important to increase awareness of the importance of the ongoing care of the building, which needs to be implemented in a project by an expert that designs the whole project. So heritage provides social and economic opportunities. It is usually a driver of economic activity and a center of innovation. And because of that, heritage is usually meaningful to society, and heritage reuse projects are usually meaningful to society, and they gain the support of the communities because of that reasons. So it's important to emphasize that community and heritage cannot be separated from each other, as the community makes the heritage and the heritage also defines the community. So just to finish, I would like to finish with a thought that I read somewhere, and that is that the heritage is only relevant when it is relevant for the people. Okay, I would maybe finish here, but maybe we can expand some of these topics in a later discussion.
Yes, I would just summarize this moment and the connection, what you and Nuno said, is this moment of knowledge and also education. That's why I think dealing with heritage is very time consuming. It's a process. It's not a recipe which can be used like in Porto as same as in Rijeka or Zagreb or anywhere else. Yes, it's a slow moment, but the architecture is slow, we know that. Also, what is very interesting, you said very clearly, is this a moment of political decision. I think it's very important that this is a sometimes political decision before then a community decision. I think we don't have to avoid that to be relevant, to make something relevant for the community. Thank you. We can now go to our second slot. I imagined. It's more about this specialization with the technical part of the heritage. What I think it's the most important now also, because some other engineers are thinking and are sometimes faster than architects. And also what is very interesting in this part, which deals mostly with this technical part, is that for me, it really shows us that we as architects have to live in the world which deals with specialization to be qualified for dealing with it. But at the same time, we have to accept that we are not alone, and we as one can't solve all the problems. And it's totally okay that we have to work in interdisciplinary groups when we are dealing with the complexities as the theme of heritage. So this is also in my intro and question first for Iva. So we know that architecture is a discipline stretched between construction, function, and aesthetics. We can follow the assumption that the architect has to be homo universale to feel his or her duty. In a theme of heritage, this is a biggest pressure than in other fields. We can agree that the world we are living is much more oriented to the specialization of knowledge. In a context of reuse and context of your preoccupation, do you think that for the first time we are witnessing the time that specialization for architects is absolutely legit, only if they admit they are not alone in this process and not the only ones who are right? What do you think about that? And what are your experiences? So of course, now this is a question for everyone.
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me tell you, when I saw the title, reuse, at first I was, reuse, it is such a broad and large topic. And then I immediately called Mia, do I have to prepare something? What? And so thank you, Ida. And yesterday evening, when I saw your mail and this statement and question, and I took another direction, because it is what to say from this, let's say, not technical aspect. So I thank you for your, let's say, questions. And I totally agree with you. While teaching all those technical courses at the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Architecture, we always arrange a number of consultants, firms to come into the classroom over the semester. And those lectures include some of the industry most respected structural, environmental engineers, manufacturers. So even today in the morning, we had a lecture from an international firm which is dealing with a system of facade systems, because in architecture schools, design is generally a solo operation. So students are not used to working with engineers or other consultants in a team scenario. However, in practice and in life, architects have to work in collaboration with other special, all the special disciplines. So the point of having all these consultants and lecture visits in the classroom was to show that architects cannot and do not operate alone and in vacuum. So in a way, let's say, because I searched what is the synonym of collectivity. Can we call it? And I asked myself a question, what does collectivity, but not, I changed it. What does collaboration, what does teamwork mean in a design process? We can call it in a way transdisciplinary team integration, or we can call it multidisciplinary way, or only collaboration between disciplines. Because, and it doesn't matter if it is a heritage, if it's a reuse, I think today, and if I only, let me read all the these subparts or all these disciplines which are integrated in this whole design phase. Building physics, structural design, acoustic design, fire safety, sustainability, durability, security, maintenance strategy, supply chain, glazing safety, budget costing, weather performance, of course, architectural design, and all these other energetic topics, ventilation, solar gain, thermal insulation, glare control. You know, it's you know, okay, you have to have the broad knowledge, you can specialize some things, but it has to be a collaboration. And it has to be from what I wanted to say, it has to be from the first phase, from all these disciplines has to be right from the start, all integrated in the design process.
What I will come for your first question, which sentence, which was about teaching. I think still this is, I think, something that will probably be our conclusion. This moment of education, teaching, and knowledge, creating a knowledge. I still think that all our universities mostly are really based on an architect as an author. And I think this is a big problem because, you know, all the other engineers don't have that problem. That's why they are faster and they're more relevant now sometimes. Or when we talk about the energetic laws and everything, who is doing it? Not we, because we are the authors, you know, and they are engineers. They don't have the problem with that. So this moment with the collaboration and the teaching us that we are not alone in the process, and to teach us what is our role here, but very precisely, not we are special author and blah, blah, is very important. That is the moment that we accept that, yes, he will do this energetic part, but with me, and I know what he needs me and I need him, and not that I'm waiting that he will give me the instructions. This is something what is happening now. Because, and we know the energetic laws are also the most important because of the climate change and the footprint, and there is big money in it. And where are we? So this is like
we have all the regulations, and if you reuse, if you refurbish an old building, if it's more than 25% of the building envelope, yeah, you have to do it as a new building. So you have to apply the new regulations. So it's not easy, but I didn't want to talk about it. But we are living in such a world, you know, in 5 years, there's so new products, new you can't follow. You have to know where you can find it, what is going on, you know, what are they producing now? 5 years or 10 years ago, it was impossible. That's why maybe I didn't express myself today. I listened 2 hours about facades, about you are sitting there, thin, no. So 10 years ago, it wasn't impossible, but okay, you're an architect, you have to know, you have to follow what is going on. But there will be another specialist who will draw it, who knows better than you and what to apply. But okay, maybe I was.
Yes, and also in this theme of reuse and public buildings, it's more difficult. It's more difficult. So we will go further. We will, of course, come back to this topic. My question for Giulia Turci. Did I say it okay? Or is it ch or k?
Ch. Turci. Yes, it's okay.
Told me Turci. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you explain how is your as a student? So you're the only student here, I think.
Yes.
Or yeah.
Maybe yes. I'm a PhD student. Yes.
Can you explain how is your research connected with the people living in districts? hoods. Is it isolated from the real districts and you are working in an isolated laboratory or one room when you are searching for the universal solution? Or is this solution also based with the community needs? Or is it possible to think the Techne as a community need and then create it through that?
Yes. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here and thank you very much for your question and for inviting me. My PhD research project deals with the positive energy district. PEDS is a quite new concept and it was introduced by European Commission in 2018. And since then, a lot of national and international initiatives and projects are focusing on this model. Even though a shared definition of a positive energy district doesn't already exist, but it is quite widely accepted that they are energy efficient urban areas that use renewable sources and manage the energy flow in a flexible and innovative way. From this definition, the PED concept is still quite abstract and it appears mainly focused on the energy component. However, the ongoing pilot project and initiative are trying to explore this concept in a multidisciplinary way, and they are not only focusing on the energy aspect, but also on social, environmental, economic, and legal aspects. So, focusing more on your question, I think that the implementation of a positive energy district, but more in general, the intervention at the district scale, even more when we deal with the existing or historical context, should be strictly related with people and community which live in the specific place. And in this case, the context where the intervention will be realized is a key factor, and it should be taken into account the specific climatic condition, but also social and regulatory dimensions. So, for example, in my research project, I'm actually collaborating with the COST International Initiative called Positive Energy District European Network, and we are trying to develop an interactive database that allow to map and compare different concept, project, pilot experience, and the innovative solution relevant for the development of a positive energy district. In this sense, the PED database make possible to work on two complementary levels. On the one hand, it can be used as a bottom-up tool, which allow to draw some guidelines and strategies useful for defining the PED concept at the general level. So to try to define a general framework for the implementation of this district at the European level. On the other hand, instead, it can be a repository of good practices where municipality, researcher, and professional can refer when they want to work on the implementation of this district in a specific context. So, in parallel to the cost action, following the activities of an Horizon 2020 project called GRETA, which stands for Green Energy Transition Action, I'm also investigating the potential of a mixed-use district in the city of Bologna in Italy, and of its community for the transition toward a positive energy district. To conclude, PED surely need a general framework at the international scale with a clear definition and also some quantitative and qualitative indicators. But at the same time, the implementation phase should be developed using context-based approaches that aim to include all groups of end user and in particular people who live and work in the area. And this should be done from the very beginning of the process. So
one more question. How many people is working on this project?
We are in the cost action. We are really a lot. We are covering almost all, no, yes, almost all European
The size
countries.
of one district.
Yes, yes, it's a really big group of people.
This would be a great example. If like one district, you make a group of one district, and then you are dealing with it and you are showing it as a plot and as an experience. You are going the experience of the result yourself.
Yes, it would be great. No.
Okay. So, of course, this multidisciplinary as or a collaboration or the group work or maybe a district group is really some kind of a conclusion that we are not alone. And I'm like happy that we agreed on that because I think this being alone of an architect is really the biggest problem in a global and contemporary world we are living in. We can now, I was thinking that we go to the last group and maybe we will have like 5 or 10 minutes just to make some conclusions all together. So the last group, I called it a bit, maybe I'm wrong, but speculative in a way, because it deals with the ideas. Which are also connected and with the heritage sometimes and with a technical part, but with some parts which are sometimes unknown to our first education as architects, something which deals with climate architecture. My question for Saveria Boulanger, is it right? Okay.
Perfect.
Do you think that the problem of reuse with the premise inactive in architecture is a context where we as architects can develop a significant role in rethinking the contemporary? For you in your occupation, are there some new tools or strategies? Are the ideas becoming strategies which are not necessarily object-oriented? And what are, in your experience, the last one or you can mention as relevant?
Thank you very much for these questions and also for calling me for expressing some opinions, some ideas that can maybe not be new, but can try to add something to this wonderful discussion. So I try to question myself a bit on this term of active reuse, especially on the perspective of being an architect, but not only an architect as a professional that do the professional works, but also as a university professor and a researcher at the university. So we actually have for sure to reconsider how buildings have been built in the past, especially in last century, as in that period of time, we tend to approach the construction of both residential, but also a lot of public buildings, mainly with a functional understanding of services and housing necessities. This has led, in my opinion, to totally forget the perspective of the long-term life of buildings, especially of public buildings that need to deal with the specificities of society needs and the evolution of society needs. But now that we are trying to cope, for example, with climate change issues, this topic has become really more important because we are now aware that climate change is a very important problem, and continuing to design building without considering their long-term life it is a big problem also in relation with climate change. So I think that the core of the concept of active reuse is also being flexible and continuously in movement in time. In fact, if we consider the word active starting from its etymology as a Latin word, the Latin verb agere, which gives the adjective and all the other forms of active, incorporate the movement in itself. And this movement should be, in my opinion, not only intended only in the active movement, involvement of people that can, of course, take part into renovations, but also in its dynamicity that says to us that changing, especially when thinking of public buildings, should occur every time it is necessary. So there is this time-related issues that we are sometimes forgetting in my experience and in my opinion. Thus, rethinking the contemporary should be done, in my opinion, really in this perspective, considering buildings in their constant evolution of functions, but maybe also implementing their technological and formal evolutionary perspective. In fact, when I was thinking about potential new strategies or tools that can help in this consideration of time as evolution of buildings, it came to my mind a reflection that I recently made with one of my colleagues, because we were writing a paper and we defined this idea of adapting reuse instead of adaptive reuse, with the idea to using this continuous form in order to try to implement that idea that spaces can change several times and multiple times in relation with the dynamicity of the context that we have. So in this paper, we also try to think about several phases and several potentialities that we can have and we can consider in the rehabilitation of spaces, especially public buildings, both indoor and outdoor. So for example, we can start from allowing the simple visibility of an area. We can pass through enabling the access and the fruition of that area, but we can also go beyond this with the idea that people can be enabled in modify on their own the space, both in the physical dimension, but also using technologies. And for sure, digital technologies can really help us as architects a lot in this trying to envisioning how the same space can evolve itself in time. And to conclude, it is crucial for me, as also we as a research group, we work a lot with community and people in co-designing renovation, new spaces, that we communicate this to people, because as we are actually in a dynamic moment of the architecture, this will probably last also in the future. So when we co-design with communities a space, we have to make them understand that it is not their project, and their project will not last always. Because if it is true that when we are co-designing in a moment with the communities, a specific forms, a specific result, a specific design for that space, that doesn't mean that this will stay longer in time. So this evolution is very important. Just for closing my intervention, it can also be that this definition of active reuse can somehow becoming like acting reuse with this continuous form, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your answer. I think this is the most problematic moment with humans is that you have to accept at the beginning that it won't last forever. But still, this evolution moment, you know that some people don't believe in evolution. This is also sometimes a big problem. I was always asking myself, does this strategy can be a fixed one, but it's adaptable with evolution? Or is it also ever changing? Oh, this is a very interesting for me. What is fixed here? What is the moment which if there are some parameters and they are quantified, this is fixed for now. Tomorrow they won't be like fixed. Is there any strategy which can be used in 20 years and is ever changing, but it's applied now and it will be applied in 20 years? Of course, it's a big speculation, but it's a totally triggering mind in a way that you are rethinking all this, and then you apply it in a moment where you live. This is very interesting for me. Thank you. The same question is also for Mar Muñoz-Aparici. Did I say it all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you will talk more about this climate moment. I don't know, but the question is the same. I will read it again. Do you think that the problem of reuse with the premise inactive in architecture is a context where we as architects can develop a significant role in rethinking the contemporary? For you in your occupation, are there some new tools, strategies, ideas that you can mention as relevant to the topic?
Well, thanks for the question, and actually the intervention of Saveria and what you just said really introduce what I'm gonna say, because actually my PhD is based on this whole idea. I'm doing a PhD in DELFT. So how can the reused public buildings be activated in the public sphere through design in contemporary urban settings? So I'm doing a design-driven research where I combine my personal practice and I put it into my research, and I bridge the theory on public space and public buildings with the actual role of the architect in a real process through experiments in public buildings. As many as you, I also had a bit the question like, oh, reuse. What can I say about reuse? But the reality is that reuse is very important because it's what most architects do, and particularly what most people of my generation, the only kind of work that we're gonna do. And it's also, we know now that is the solution or one of the ways that we need to go. So these aspirations that we had before of making public buildings that would change anything, now we know that things can also be changed from the built reality, from what's already been. But how do we keep it contemporary? If we're always reusing, if we take this status quo, okay, we take buildings and we reuse them, how do we add contemporary notions and meanings? And so in my discussion, I'm going to focus on public buildings because I think they embody, we talk about reuse in general, but they embody the collective better. In my case, I'm from Spain originally, so I'm from the south, but I do my research in the north of Europe. So I also embody myself this northern southern differences. So we were talking about this climate change, and not climate change, but the climate that everything is changing all the time, right? So as Bauman puts it, we live in liquid modernity or in late modernity, where the only constant is change. In a context where reference points, institutions, and values are ever shifting, how can we decide taking in mind the collective? Buildings last for decades, while collectives are temporary foam, in the words of Sloterdijk. We're all bubbles engaging in codependent insulation. In a brief collective. Even taking account. Yeah.
You're frozen for a second.
Yeah, sorry. Even taking into account the digital collective. So these two approaches that Ida was presenting, the physical and programmatic, are valid and they're complementary. Sometimes there is a latent need in a community. Sometimes there is a policy change that needs to be tested out. So in my case, I'm working in a combination of those two methods in a case of public libraries. In this case, it is not necessarily outdated buildings or buildings that are already heritage, but it is definitely buildings that need to be adapted to more contemporary values. Nowadays, we all have access to books. We can all access all information that we need whenever we need it. So what's the role of public libraries? So I'm working with this project with the Royal Library of the Netherlands to introduce new programs in existing buildings, and particularly in the case of makerspaces in libraries. So a shift in collective values from libraries as places of knowledge consumption to places of knowledge creation. So it is a combination of top-down and bottom-up, but because it is a new program that comes from policy. But the idea is that through design, we can instigate the creation of a community that incorporates these new social values of digital literacy and lifelong learning. Therefore, this process is started with what are the meanings of libraries, what is the meaning of making, what are the latent meanings in the community. It is not the same a library in the Netherlands as in Spain, in urban or suburban. So the meaning of a public building and its program also changes according to the setting. Ideally, this part of the process, it is a co-production process that takes into account a large array of agents and that aims to discover these collective meanings. So the role of the architect is to connect these meanings, to provide suitable affordances that strengthen the agency of the public building, both as a built reality and as an institution in the public sphere in the city, and so that later the collective can build contemporary significances around it. So, well, going to a public building means entering public life. You know, public buildings frame this liminal process of passing from being an individual at your house to becoming part of the collective. And this is very abstract, but in the end, this process begins much before the person enters a public space where they're headed. This liminal process involves a lot of variables, including the publicity of the building in space, the image, the identity. So these are the things that I'm exploring in my research. And most importantly, also something that Saveria proposed, the concept of unfinished public buildings. So buildings have been, especially public buildings, have been designed by architects and architects, have repurposed buildings and designed buildings thinking that they were going to change completely their reality, but they were finished objects. They were sculptures placed in a moment of time that were not able to adapt to these changes. So that's why buildings that are 2, 3, 5, 10 years old are already outdated for these ever-changing values. So that's why I introduced the notion of threshold. So this liminal transition, it's a threshold. It is not an inside and outside, it's not private and public. It is a process of individuals coming together. And that's the conceptual notion that I'm trying to explore in my practice. This evidently changes from context. It's not the same engaging in public life in the north of Europe or in the south. It has to do with cultural reasons, climatological reasons. So if this reactivation of public buildings departs from specific collective meanings, we need to ask a lot of questions. And that's when knowledge comes in. We need to take into account our knowledge as technicians, but the collective intelligence that is already present in the location. So I think in the end, if I had to summarize, especially for the second question, what are the strategies that I'm working on? I would like to look at often the overlooked strategies. So we know how to design buildings. We're taught this in school. But so the first strategy is this collective intelligence that incorporates placemaking, participation, but also collective as in other technicians, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. The concept of unfinished, taking time into account. Are we ready for people to take over this creation, and how are we enabling this takeover? It's very nice for this topic, the last book of Sennett and Sendra about designing a disorder. So architects, what we do is provide the infrastructure for people to take over and create this disorder. And last but not least, the concept of publicity. In order to repurpose and reuse a public building, publicity and media are very important. As Ida said in the introduction, sometimes a very strategic repurpose of a public building can be completely taken out of context by the media, and for good or for bad. So how the building appears in the public sphere is not only physical, material, but it is also immaterial, and it entails visual, digital, and graphical reality too. Thanks.
In a way of storytelling, which can be totally a new project for itself. Architect is a storyteller also. Thank you very much. I'm totally, it was very intuitive in a way, also how I made these groups, but now after this everlasting reuse and about this unfinished concept of unfinishedness. For the last one, I picked Jana Horvat. What is very interesting in her PhD, she's doing right now. Her research is dealing with the methodology of dismantling. Or non-building, or maybe ruining it. She now came, maybe, Jana, you will tell us about the conclusion that sometimes reuse is useful. Usefulness, it's not useful. So when we talk about from my first question, and the story about the heritage, which is really something which is established and is respected in a specific way. My question for you is, I know that you are trying to dismantle the methodology of reuse by trying to find the facts that go for that in a way that subtraction, if we have a reference in Keller-Esterling, is sometimes or many times a better solution to a problem. What are your conclusions for now and your cognitions on that topic?
First of all, hi to everyone and thanks for having me today. So yeah, thank you for a great question. I'm actually still at the very beginning of my research, so maybe I can't talk that much about the concrete results and conclusions yet, but I can definitely tell you a bit more about how I chose to focus on this theme of subtraction in the first place. So initially, I was very interested in this phenomenon of building decay that is, of course, unfortunately, extremely present in Croatia. We are kind of a country rich with ruins, with derelict and abandoned buildings, especially bearing in mind the fact that we have had a war on our territory not so long ago, and we had some natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes, and we don't take that good care of some of our buildings, so the general situation is kind of bad. And of course, at the very beginning of my research, a natural way of looking at all those ruins architecturally was thinking in one way or another about adaptive reuse. So our topic today, I initially started from that. Then I couldn't help but feeling that sometimes in dealing with abandoned or derelict buildings, this reuse methodology is being taken for granted in a way, or considered the only right approach, especially if we are talking about the building on a valuable plot of land somewhere in a big city. Of course, you're going to reuse it. But then I wanted to question this paradigm, especially in light of the fact that in Croatia, we often lack either money for elaborate physical reuse projects, or we lack political will, And programmatic reuse only makes sense if we have the targeted end users for our reuse project. But seeing that we have a very steep depopulation rate in Croatia, often we also lack those end users. So that was also a big problem. And then, well, it turns out that sometimes it really is better to maybe take an alternative approach. And the one I'm researching now in my PhD is subtraction as a spatial strategy that, in my view, has great creative potential. And the basic idea is that as architects, we usually think about the act of building, so adding something new to space. But today, I feel there is an increasingly great need for us to think about unbuilding as well, kind of reversing the usual thought process. Because today, the whole capitalist mindset is based on continuous addition, growth, eternal growth. And that is starting to leave serious spatial consequences. A lot of spatial junk is being accumulated everywhere around us. So instead of being forced to reuse a building or building complex if it's not functioning well, sometimes it would maybe really be more efficient and fair to demolish it and to produce a new urban void, a potential new public space in place of that building, or a park or a pocket garden in the city. And I think this is something that really resonates, especially with Southern European countries, where those urban voids are historically the most important places of collectivity. So togetherness happens in the void of a street, in the void of a small square. So I think this kind of strategy really especially makes sense in our context. And of course, okay, there are a lot of issues with this. A major issue when thinking about demolishing something in the city and turning it into a public void is, of course, ownership, but that can't be overlooked. So this strategy could primarily work on plots of land owned by the city or by the municipality. It's a bit tougher when it's privately owned land. And of course, this strategy could also work outside of dense city situations. Then it's a bit different. For instance, in a case of abandoned industrial complexes somewhere in the countryside, or maybe perhaps a small village that has lost all its residents, and we have those in Croatia, it's very interesting for me to think of the extreme condition of giving the space completely back to nature. Of course, that's not a process that's easily designed. I'm not sure if it can be designed at all. So that's a more complex topic that I would, maybe wish to research one day. But yeah, anyways, I believe, to sum up, that everything I'm talking about can, in a way, still be seen as a sort of borderline condition of physical reuse. So I hope I didn't digress too much from the initial topic. I think it should just be viewed as a proposed perspective shift that may be useful in some situations. So thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you. I will just comment that biggest demolishings in history were very connected with the hygiene. And in this pandemic
from
world,
Osman and Paris, yeah.
Maybe in this pandemic world, it could make sense in a way. So thank you, everyone. We are now we are finished because we are 3 minutes in our virtual coffee break. But I would like to just to thank you all for your great answers and this feedback on my questions. We will have a recap in 5:45, so in 1 hour from now. So maybe it is the best, so we can meet also there. Okay. Wow, yeah, the computer with the down camera. So what I really want to say for now, that some words which are mentioned here are all, and which were the words which were used in all of your questions is knowledge, which also is connected with education. This conclusion which you gave, all of you, is that the combination of the programmatic and physical, as I told, reuse has to be a combination for successful and active reuse. So do you want to add something? Some of you? We can really all meet afterwards on this recap, because I will give a better recap in 1 hour. So see you there. Is that the question you are waiting? See you and bye, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ida. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.